Why make more waste? You don't need to. That's serving nobody. But you can offer worldwide shipping in 2 days. Yeah, at what cost? You're wasting money and you're killing the environment. Like, no, why would you do that?
Welcome to the GOAT Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassinan. At GOAT, we define sustainability through the lens of intentionality, circularity, and community. With this framework, any problem can be solved. The stories that we share, the pioneers that we talk to, show us a different way to build the future we all want to have.
We're at a pivotal moment where nuclear is needed more than ever. Let's once and for all become a circular economy.
Waste is not cost neutral. Like, it always costs your business something. So if you can get rid of that, then that's good for business as well.
There's this dissonance. We talk a really good game about protecting the ocean, but the purchase decisions that we make don't match with our espoused values.
An ideal food system revolves around relationship. Where is my food coming from? Who's growing it? How is it being grown? And why does that matter?
Thanks for being here. Let's dive into the conversation. What appealed to me about Solgaard just from the beginning, I mean, I've had you guys on my radar for years, and it's been because like it's so thoughtfully designed, but also like you guys have such clever design thoughts that go into the product. And so one, I just want to say stoked to have it, but also I would love to start with just where did your kind of design mind start? Where did you start to look at products and be like, oh, how could I do this differently?
So I mean, I use the word invention for kind of what you're saying. I think I don't want to enter a product in a new category unless it's doing something different that others aren't doing, and that can translate to a few different ways. But like our backpack has a closet in it, or the suitcase has a closet in it. The watch is a hexagon shaped. The Bluetooth speaker also charges your phone, and it's solar powered. Like, you can go and buy a Bluetooth speaker, but you can't find. There's now one other solar powered speaker. You can find luggage, but we've got a patent on our closet system. So like, there's this. I don't want to enter a category unless we're sort of disrupting the market in some sort of way. And I guess that all started. The first product that I made was a bicycle lock. That was a lock that lived inside the bike. So if you know bikes well at all, there's a seat post, and then there's a lock that would go inside of it. So I made a custom seat post that had a special hole in it. Launched that on Kickstarter in 2012, tail end of 2012. And that was successfully funded. That was very early Kickstarter days, raised like $51,000. But it was kind of like, at that moment, I was like, background of video creation and like doing that. I always loved like building stuff and tinkering on stuff when I was like in the garage and stuff as a kid and as a teenager. So it's like, I wanted to make something that could work in the mass market. I didn't want to just like build hobby projects for myself. I wanted to make something that offered this like unique benefit in some sort of way that hadn't been done before. And so I guess it's just, depending on how far back you want to go. Your original question was, where did this design thinking start? But as a kid, like when I was 8 years old, I wished for tape for Christmas. And I've realized that most of the inventions that I've come out with are A plus B equals the new thing. And it's this 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing where you're able to like put, and it's really like, my brain is very simple and very basic. It's just like, put two things together that haven't been put together before, and now all of a sudden you have an entirely new thing. And I think that's great fun. And it's funny how simple it is actually when you boil it down.
Well, and I'd imagine you probably use some tape when you're putting A to B and to kind of like see prototype wise, like, can this work?
Yeah. The generally speaking, I can't have my Zoom camera tilted down because there is like taped up chunks of cardboard floating around.
I think that, so did you play around with Legos, or was it like more like tape? Because a lot of people who build things, they kind of start with like that Lego idea of like, you have the thing that you buy in Legos and then you build something else.
Yeah. No, I loved Lego as a kid. I loved Lego as a kid. We'd went to Legoland a few times when I was like 8 or 10, because my family's in Norway. So we'd, fly into Copenhagen. It was cheaper, and drive up through Denmark and stop at Legoland on the way. And yeah, like my brother and I were always building stuff. My brother went the engineering path. And so like, yeah, when I was 11, I bought a Volkswagen bus out of the back of the newspaper. for $400. It was all my summer raspberry picking money, and I bought this Volkswagen bus and just started like working on it and like driving it around. My grandparents lived on like a 5-acre little hobby farm, so I just like drive it around in the back. And so I was riding bikes, so I was always breaking bike parts, and I've just always been growing up on a farm. You're just like always fixing stuff. It's not just playing with Legos toys. It's like building stuff that'll like, keep the chickens safe or do what like. There's a lot of little things like that need to get built. So
That's super cool. I mean, so when you have that fascination, I mean, I think when you start to look at products like really closely, you do see that most things that are built, whether it's an iPhone or a microphone, whatever that is, they're pieces that just get put together, and most of them aren't, fabricated by the same person. It's this collection of things to make a product. And to be honest, I've never really looked at things as much that way. I always look at like the function side of things. How do you start to bridge that? Because I think, there's like this thing when you're young where you can just like, you just try everything. And I think that that's super important to kind of carry over as you get older. And oftentimes we get kind of like boxed in almost as adults. We're like, no, we have to go in this lane because we have to be responsible and do all these things. How do you kind of keep that childlike exploration, so to speak? Because the products you create are not on the market.
I think that there's like, I'm unemployable. Like I could not work at a job. I never lasted very long, uh, because it's that curiosity is something that's born in kids, and it's beaten out of us through adulthood or through like teenagehood, through childhood, whatever. And I think that I just happen to have a disposition that like still asks why, but why, but why, but why. Um, that just never quite got beaten out of me. So um, yeah, can't give parenting advice. I'm not a parent, but I think that like that is like the sole job of a parent is to like help allow a kid to flourish in their creativity and just like stay in that lane whenever possible. I know it's not possible to do for all things, and we can't. Oh, we could maybe. Could we have a world of just fully curious people?
I sure hope we can. Like I think I
That'd
think
be incredible.
curiosity is, I think it's one of those things that like I think
It
that
gets a bad
unlocks
rap.
our
I don't think
potential.
it killed the cat.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, right? Like all the greatest things that have ever been invented, done, cars, planes, technology, laptops, email, everything. It was all kind of born out of this like, well, why? Why not try for it? Why does it have to be this way?
Like what? Why not is like the most powerful question to ask, because it's so often we're like, oh, it's not done that way, but why? What if it just could be instead?
Yeah. And I think I think part of it's rooted in like this, I don't know, fear of it not working, like that fear of failure aspect of like, oh, well, if it doesn't work, that was a waste of time. And it's like, no, that because you learn a lot during that whole process.
And I think it's fun to it's fun to just like try out making solutions, and like that's my ideal day off, is taking a day off and just like tinkering on stuff and just like why not, like what's this going to be like. Of course it does mean a lot of half fulfilled, half finished projects kicking around, but
But that's what ultimately I think leads to the better one. So the bike lock thing, what kind of influenced that one? Was it because sometimes when products are made, it's out of necessity. The other one is like, well, I just want to tinker with something.
so that was a combination. So I started a creative agency, making like TV commercials, music videos, doing websites for different companies. um, I- and I'd kind of real like I loved creating. So I worked in television for 4 years, and I was doing about 3 years of this like creative agency thing, which is like very creative work, but everything is ephemeral. Like you make a TV show, and it's like you can never touch it, you can never feel it. And I was like, okay, I've produced all these things from idea, like concept to reality on film. What if I could do it with products? Um, and I was fortunate to have a family friend, who was in the plastic injection industry, um, and it was my high school girlfriend. Like her dad had this factory producing plastic parts, so I was able to get a really interesting look under the hood of what that world was like. And by seeing what how plastic injection works, how do blow molds work to make a bottle, how do I was able to get this really interesting amount of knowledge from him about just like how things are made, and it started making me think of other ways to make things. Um, and we broke up before this time happened, so he wasn't able to be involved in any of the bike lock thing. But it was it was then that I was like, okay, I can make a product, I can make a video. Could I make a product? And what kind of product could I make? And I was dating this girl who lived in Amsterdam, and I wanted to find a way to move to Amsterdam. So I wanted to find a way for my remote work to work on a longer term basis, which meant no more client facing video stuff, and instead switching to this like consumer brand thing. Because I realized like, yeah, I love mass market communication, like communicating out to the broader public. That's cool to do through TV. What if I just did that for a product? And Kickstarter became this new tool to try out. And so I put this put this concept for the bike lock together, put it on Kickstarter, and it worked. And so then just kind of started going from there. But yeah, like I started working remotely in 2012. And then it kind of like, while through running the bike lock business, um, and sort of getting some commercial success with that. It was distributed in like 30 countries. But it was all these distributor issues of like, they were not telling the story right of the product. So I figured for the next business, I should do something where I'm able to control the narrative, control the story. And that's how Solgaard was born.
How'd you learn that process of scaling a product business? Because I think that when most people go into like, hey, I want to make a product, there's the whole other world of supply chain and suppliers and price per unit and minimum orders. And how did you navigate that side of things? Because I think in the early Kickstarter days, like 2012, Kickstarter was wild. Like it was so cool because it was literally like, if you dreamt up something, people could support it. Like it was so cool. And I remember when like products would come out of nowhere and it was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And people got to do it. But then you had that whole other side of like so many Kickstarter projects failed because they literally couldn't deliver it. How'd you navigate that side?
Overestimating your capabilities and is an easy thing to do for any founder. And I think that when you have the responsibility of, I think that's what's amazing about Kickstarter is your reputation is at stake. You're really putting yourself out there and you're like, if I don't deliver this, and that's one of the reasons why I was so forward about putting my face on it too. Cause it's like, oh, like, yes, I've got your money. I'll figure it out somehow. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. To answer your question, I think that the optimism that a lot of founders have is what allows us to jump in headfirst into things that we don't quite fully grasp and then figure it out along the way. And I think that if I would have known how challenging it was going to be, I mean, I probably still would have done it, but like I learned a lot of things the wrong way, the hard way. And was very fortunate to just have some great mentors and some really wonderful people in the space. A good friend of mine, Darcy Sakuchi, he invented this bicycle seat and seat post thing that took over the entire BMX industry. He was able to connect me with factories in Taiwan and start working with like really reputable places right off the bat with a trading agent that was over there to do the day-to-day stuff at the factories. And without Darcy's introductions, I don't know how it would have worked out or if it would have worked out at all. So I really owe Darcy a huge ton of credit for the support that he.
I think it hits a good point because people are part of this process, and I think a lot of the times the founder is always considered like, oh, they're the person doing it all, and it's like no company ever gets anywhere without the help of really a great community of either people, mentors, and kind of partners. How do you kind of navigate that? Because I think a lot of people are like, well, I want to go find a mentor, but like I don't know, in my experience, it's never been that. It's been like you've been really interested in what somebody does and you actually end up just forming a friendship and you just go deeper into conversation. Like it's not I'm searching out this person to solve this problem. Instead, it's like organic.
Yeah. The formal mentorship thing is amazing if you happen to come across it. It's not necessarily something that you can just ask and go and find. I did have one mentor that that turned into a sort of formal relationship in that way, where I was making a video for him. I was filming the CEO of this company. He had a crane company. It was a promotional video. When I was doing the agency side of things, and as I'm like interviewing him, or as we're like setting up the mic or taking the mic off after it, he was kind of like, "So you run this company? You're doing it?" And like I'd been like asking him all the questions and stuff, and he was like, he was he was sort of prodding me a little bit more deeply than I would have expected, because it was like, okay, he's asking a bit about what I'm doing, and yeah, okay, and he's like, you'd be surprised how many people how many CEOs of companies are willing to share their time with somebody else to help show them the ropes, and like, sometimes all you have to do is ask. And it's like, you're like, this is such a weirdly blunt like offer, and like I could miss it if I didn't. I was like, I took a second. I was like, all right, well, Jim, like, would you be interested in like being a mentor for me? He's like, absolutely. And so we spent like, over the next like 2 years, we'd get together for lunch not every 2 weeks, but probably once a month. And I learned so much from him about scaling a business, and it's all about people. It's all about people. But like, because not like the shared knowledge of whatever, the culture within a company, the way that employees interact with each other, the way that all of that stuff matters. Um, it matters so much. And um, yeah, you're right. It's not like there's this founder story that sometimes happens, or people like want the founder to be like a hero or whatever. But they're not. It's an orchestra. All that a founder is doing is conducting an orchestra and trying to get lots of things going together at the same time.
My mentor now to this day, still original one, um, literally got me to get into media when I was graduating college, and it was one of those things where they went to school with my mom in high school, and it was like they ran into each other in the grocery store. It's like, oh, let's chat, and we just met for coffee and that kind of thing. And he's huge in the technology industry in Silicon Valley, like right in the beginning, invention of cell phone cameras, like that whole world was like his world, and early Netflix and all that kind of stuff. And it was so it's so incredible because you learn so much. And one of the greatest things that ever happened was I called him one time and I was like, Andy, I have no idea what to do right now. Like, there's so many things going sideways. I don't even know if we're going to make it. What the hell do I do? I'm feeling this way. Holy shit. And he goes, welcome. Oh yeah, no, that happens. That's happened to me like 5 or 6 times. Don't worry about it. and you're just like, oh, collective exhale.
I had a friend who, he's like 6 or something years younger than me, and he ran into this situation with his business where it was completely screwed. He was deep in shit streak, and I was like, yeah, this is part of it. Same thing. And it's like, it's so good to feel like, wow, this fucking sucks. Oh, and this is normal? Well, okay. It makes this suck a lot more tolerable.
Yeah. And I think that's part of I guess the entrepreneurial or founder story that they don't really talk about much. It's like this whole, it's, stages and famous and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's just such a willingness to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, like always uncertain. And when you are certain about something, you're actually pretty certain. But a lot of it's found in being like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing in this situation. Let's try and figure it out. And I'm going to do the best I can to make the best of it. And you just keep doing that over and over and over and over again. And I found that to be like the biggest lesson. And so, I mean, when you went through Bike Lock, you learned a lot of lessons from that, I'm sure. When you began to you were traveling a lot. When you started to transition that into maybe a new idea, what was that transition like? Was there like certain things where you're like, well, shit, I'm not going to do that again. But I really liked this aspect. Was there stuff that translated?
It's everything is a transferable skill for a founder's journey, at least. Like, because as you're starting a company, you're going to need to hire out every single function within the company at some point. And so if you learned how to wash dishes, that can be a transferable skill. If you're opening a restaurant, it helps you be a better manager of the dishwashing crew or whatever. And so I think that, yeah, like I started a t-shirt company at 16 when I was in high school to pay for travel to BMX contests. Then I learned how to make videos so I could get sponsored. My video skill turned out to be pretty good, so I started doing videos for a TV show. I got like as an internship there, and then I started editing, and then I started a company doing that skill. And then I used that video skill to make a first products based business. And then I used that knowledge of like supply chain and working in China and Taiwan and whatever to create a next product that I used the Kickstarter skill that I've used that to continue the digital marketing build out, whatever. And now we're making TV commercials again. And it's for the product so it's like all of these, it's all building blocks. And it's really, there's a Steve Jobs quote about, it only makes sense when you look backwards. And I think for anyone in their 20s, it's like, pursue whatever passions you have, because it's not necessarily going to make sense. Steve Jobs was taking a course on calligraphy, and he learned about typeface and spacing and whatever. And then therefore that led to the first graphical interface software that had beautiful fonts and beautiful text. And like, it's because he pursued that one passion there. Like, these things don't make sense in the moment, especially when you're in the storm of your 20s or whatever. It can seem chaotic, but at the end of your life, when you start to, or whatever, later in life, when you start to look backwards, it's like, oh, right, that fed to that thing, to that thing. Oh, it all clicks. Crazy. We are but the sum of our experiences.
It's so true. I mean, especially in those, I mean, I've had some crazy experiences when I was in my 20s, and it was kind of one of those things where you go around and you're doing all these different things, and you're like, oh man, is this the route that I want to go? Well, this seems like a deviation. And you're like, oh, well, I want to go this other direction, but you end up staying in that same type of situation. But you learn so many lessons from that, yeah, when you look back, you're like, oh, that helped me with this and that. And a lot of the things that I found to be like one of the biggest deviations ended up being one of the biggest assets that I have nowadays. And I'm like, well, look at that. It works. And I think that people just need to be open to experiencing things. Like in all the CEOs and founders that I've gotten to talk to, the common thread between every single one of them is, one, the path to where they were was never linear, ever. And most likely it was in a way that is very unexpected for the common person that isn't in that world. They would be like, wait, really? Well, that's kind of like my story too. And it's like, yeah, actually it is. So like, go experience as much as possible and get after it.
And like, we shouldn't, society has this thing of like, oh, what'd you go to school for? It's like, who cares? Like, what we go on to do with our lives is what's the more interesting part. That one background you have from that 4-year period of your life or whatever is just a thing that people learn. That doesn't need to be necessarily a part of your future path at all. I have a friend she got a master's in physics because she was like, business class would be too boring. She knew she was going to go into business, but she took physics because she wanted to study something more interesting. And like, I think that's great. I didn't go to university at all, so I can't comment on this topic, but like, I think that, part of that being an ever curious person, and continuing your journey of discovery and learning, I think that's what gives the spice in life. I think that's what gives the excitement and the energy to wake up the next day, is like, oh, I wonder what thing I might learn or uncover or discover. Like, if you're just getting on with the doldrums of life and banging the same drum forever because you think that's what you want to do, like, I don't know, it's probably not. Like, go play, have fun,
play. Yeah. Well, and I think also, yeah, that side of always trying to learn. Like, I think learning something every single day and being curious about whatever it is. Like, I keep kind of like a schedule, if you will, but like things that I want to achieve every day. And it's not necessarily at this time, and it's not a to-do list, but usually on that, it has learn, because it's like, learn something every day. Check that thing that says, hey, I learned something new today. And when you're able to do that, you have a way better perspective around just anything and everything, and you're open. I think one of the biggest things is to be open, and like, when you actually set out to, make a new product category, especially like when it comes to, travel equipment, like that, suitcases have been around a long time. Backpacks have been around a long time. Like it could be argued that there wasn't anything that was really innovated, right? You're just made another backpack, made another suitcase, but it's actually in how it was made and what it was made of and how it was designed that fundamentally made it different. What was that like when you were trying to design that? Like, because obviously part of that was the learning experience from everything you did before.
It's funny because like I said in a sort of self-deprecating way earlier, like the way that my products are is just like like 1 + 1 = 3. So I was looking at, how to make a quality suitcase that could just function as a normal suitcase would. And then I had this idea for this closet, and I wanted to find a way to combine the two in a way that would work, but also like if people didn't like the closet, they could still use the suitcase as a normal one, because it was it was a YOLO bet. I was putting everything on the line to make that suitcase work. So it's like, in case it doesn't work, it needs to be a good, just regular suitcase too, because there was no budget to have that not work out.
Did you grab, Briggs and Riley cases and all these other suitcases and go, hey, let's design, like, here's the basis? Or do you just like,
On that one, I went factory first on the suitcase. Found the right factory partner, because that's critical. Um, if you have the wrong factory partner, the thing's not going to turn out right. Um, and then I just kind of went, okay, what parts are available to use, and then what is the customization options after that? Because like we're not going to pay for tooling to open molds for like wheels and handles, and it's like, so can we use off the shelf handles and wheels at the start? Now we do all that stuff custom, but like using that off the shelf, figure out what are the parameters for creativity. Creativity works best in a sandbox, right? In like constraints, having some constraints, and then you're like, oh great, I can play in this space. So finding the right factory, finding the constraints, and then okay, what are the things that we can customize, and then we started designing from there. So yeah, that was like the basis for it. And I think it's funny, I prefer to work that way actually with factories, is like get in with their constraints first, get the technical needs sort of met, like find out what like build an ugly but functional MVP, minimum viable product, for if you haven't heard that phrase. Build an ugly but functional one, and then once the function's good, then make it beautiful. And I think that that's like an art of Scandinavian design, which is form follows function. And it's like, make the function first and then have the form follow that. Make sure that it works really well first, and then go from there. And that's really been my preferred way of designing anything.
well, and so for those that don't know Scandinavian design, you probably would know it when you see it because it's absolutely beautiful, and then also it does function. How did that kind of play a role? How did Scandinavian design kind of like come into your life? I know you mentioned your family being in Norway. How did that kind of start to influence your design aesthetic?
I spent a lot of my summers in Norway as a kid. And like then we just be around Scandinavian products, because you have, you know, there's a lot of little Scandinavian companies, the smaller Scandinavian companies that make like really lovely outdoor furniture. And in the summer in Norway, like it's a lot of it's like 65 degrees Fahrenheit, where it's like if you're in the sun and there's no wind, it's super warm. But if you're in the shadow and it's windy, it's kind of chilly. And so there's like a lot of ways to set up furniture and pockets and like doing things where you're, so like I think that like there was some exposure to it through that, like as a kid, just like well made furniture and things like that. Then I did an internship for a Norwegian artist in when I was 18 in 2005, and I went and I spent 3 months like working with this filmmaker and artist, just helping him with various stuff. Um, and yeah, and then like the first hire for Solgaard was a Danish guy named Anders, who used to work for Lego, and we like the company was based in Denmark for the first 2 years. I started it when I was living in Spain. I've a lot of the things that I've done in life were for chasing a girl.
Yeah.
um, and like it's comical. I haven't run that statement by my PR
Yeah.
person, but it's actually comical because it's like the bike lock I made so I could move
Go
to
to
Amsterdam
Amsterdam.
to live with this other girl. Then we broke up, and then this Danish girl's backpack got stolen, and I was like, well, I know how to make a lock, so what if I make a backpack with a lock in it? And then ended up moving to Denmark later, and then we broke up, and then I moved to New York. But it's like, yeah, totally getting sidetracked. But no, like living in Denmark for those couple of years, working with a lot of different Danish designers and people, it's sort of and like I don't know. I guess it's funny. Like if I was to flip the question on you and be like, how would you say that your exposure to American culture has informed your podcast style? Like, I don't know. I've just been around it. It's just in my bones and in my blood. Like,
Yeah. I think the exposure's key. It's kind of like what you surround yourself with. I think that's a reflection of, how you surround yourself in the day-to-day life. I think, for me, the I didn't have the Scandinavian design exposure, but my grandparents, they traveled all over the world, and they would get things on their travels, and most likely they were handmade, incredibly beautiful. Um, and they would just tell me the story of like, oh, we went to this place and we went and talked to this, shop owner who built this for 30 years. And then here's the thing we wanted to always remember that trip by. And, and then a lot of my day-to-day life, my parents would go, look, if you're going to, even get a stereo, for example, like get the one that you're most drawn to from a design standpoint and a function standpoint, and then just save for it. Like the idea was like, go for the thing you're really passionate about and that you find beauty in. And it taught me to kind of look at products and look at things differently, where it started to cultivate that mindset in kind of the day-to-day life.
see, I never had that kind of exposure of get the thing that you like the look of. For me, it was only ever get the thing that does the job, get the thing that serves a purpose.
It had to do
So
that too, yes.
so I'm so one side of my family, I'm Norwegian. The other side is Mennonite, like German. My grandparents were born in what is today Ukraine, and then they moved to Canada after World War II. But Mennonites are very. It's funny because I can actually speak plainly about it and not worry about any backlash because it's part of my backstory. But like Mennonites are a bit stingy, like cheap, and like want to reuse and repurpose things, and like just not create waste for waste's sake. My grandmother would always wrap our Christmas presents in old bed sheets that she had sewn into bags, or like old pillowcases that were made into gift bags. And it was like there was this very like don't don't buy a thing unless you need it. If you can fix it first. Do that first, whatever. And so like there was that sort of intent. So I think that that's always where I have this like if you're gonna buy something, buy quality, but try to find it like secondhand or at a discount or whatever. Don't pay retail, but buy quality. And I think that that's like I think that's like a core tenet of something in my software that's just yeah.
Yeah, in there. I mean, my dad has been a pilot my whole life, and he when you're young in a pilot as a pilot, you don't make really anything, and he's trying to provide for brother and I, and give us the best education possible, that kind of thing. And so he would sell cars on the side, and he was always passionate about Mercedes, and Mercedes very much about luxury, right? But this was back in the day when Mercedes really like was the cream of the crop, and it wasn't just because it was an expensive car. He would go through the entire car with me and go, well, here's the thing that they designed, and here's the reason why, and here's the reason why they do this, and here's the reason why we do that. And my very first car was a really, really old Mercedes that was like $2,000, like just like considered old and whatever. But the thing ran to 220,000 miles because it was well built. It was beautiful. I had to wash it all the time to keep it in pristine condition. It was like, take care of the things that you have, find the well built thing, and it'll last. It was honestly, they were so great, so great. And it just gave me this appreciation for like the little details of things actually matter. And it doesn't have to be brand new, but it should be quality. And everything was embedded in quality, and then make it last as long as possible. And I think that's where a lot of my sustainability mindset came from. Because I think when we go to define sustainability, right now it's so much around net zero and carbon, and of course those are important, but a lot of it is about just make the thing last. Because if you're putting something into a waste cycle, as you mentioned, like as little waste as possible, because when something is at end of life, most likely,
why make more waste? Like what? Like you don't need to. Like what's the point? Like that's serving nobody. It's more. It's funny how honestly sustainability is being stingy. Like how can you do things the cheap way? Like the right way? Like we don't air freight our products because it'd be an insane carbon footprint, but like also it'd be stupidly expensive. A suitcase is big. There's a lot of air. Like you're wasting money and you're killing the environment. Like no, why would you do that? But you can offer worldwide shipping in 2 days. Yeah, at what cost? Like nobody needs a suitcase in 2 days. So wait a couple days. It's fine.
what we've rooted Goat in a lot is like this idea of like make something last, and it doesn't, like, of course you want something to be sustainably made, but if it's made locally and made to last, it can be argued that that's actually more sustainable. And it's this idea of like take it secondhand if you can, have it be well made. Like even when you look at a lot of furniture these days, it's like the furniture is not really made of solid wood anymore. The solid wood thing, it probably lasts. And what I love about really your approach to products is it kind of has that luxury mindset, right? That it's beautifully designed, so you're like, wow, I want to take care of this. That I think is number one. But then two is like when you look at somebody, for example, Rolex. I know you guys make watches, but we'll just use this as an example. And I'm not really a Rolex guy, but the idea is that most likely you're going to pass that to your grandkids because it's like, oh, well, that's a Rolex. That one watch served the purpose for 3 generations. Not a lot of waste versus a Timex. Like that kind of mindset, I think, is the thing that's missing in sustainability. It's everyone's saying new and alternative, and yes, it's material space is super cool, and I think that more research needs to be done to that, but longevity is, I think, part of it. And part of what you guys do is actually longevity. It's well-made products.
Yeah. I think like it's funny because I'm not a Rolex guy either. I got to this point where I was like, I could like splash out and buy myself a really cool watch, or I could spend the same amount of money and create a watch line. So it was like, that's what I did because that's way more fun. Like everybody, like whatever. There's like living in New York City. There's so many people have Rolexes. It's like, okay, great, whatever. Like who cares? Like you're not. It's not even unique. Like, but you're totally right. I think like heirloom pieces, I think is such an important and incredible thing. If you can buy something that's going to be passed down to the next generation and used, like that's incredible.
I just encourage more people to do that, and whatever that is. Like just take care of the things, and the things will last if they're well made. And that's the best part about it. Like a lot of the electronics nowadays, they're made to fail. Fair. Like technology moves at a certain speed, but make it last as long as possible. I think my last laptop was like 6 years old.
I think designed obsolescence is such horseshit. I think it's borderline fraudulent. I have my girlfriend has this like hair blow dryer comb stick thingy. I don't know. It's like, and it stopped working on her. The way the switch was this like twisted. So I took it apart just to like see how and why it broke to see if I could fix it. But it was like the way that it was a standard switch type, but there was this like little flimsy piece of plastic that was like, and it was like a fuse. The plastic end that would flip the switch has like a fuse, like where the plastic went thinner, so it would break in time on twisting the button, like after whatever. And it's like the thing still fully functioned, but the switch was designed to break, so you'd have to buy a new one after a year or two. It's just like, come on, that is bad business, and it's creating a ton of waste. It's this big plastic chunk, like it's gross.
So when it comes to product design, like how do you do that as a business, right? Like Solgaard's running pretty smoothly, and you guys aren't making products in order for it to fail. So like, because I think there's this perception of like, especially if you're going to go more public as a company or whatever that is, that, you know, you need more sales, more sales, more sales, more profit. And therefore, if people have to buy it again, but they like it just enough, they'll buy it again from you. What's the approach to be different?
I mean, so on average, a suitcase is something someone owns for about 7 years, at which point they either get bored of it, they tire of it. Suitcases are something you can very easily pass down to your cousin or whatever. And like after 7 years, you just want a different colored suitcase. That's fine. Like, but this thing is still going to work. Just like give it to somebody else. That's great. And so we're not trying to sell someone another suitcase the same year. I mean, unless you want to buy one as a gift, then please do. But I think that's what, like, we have to make the business commercially viable. You need to think. It's funny because the word sustainable can pop up in so many different ways. Sustainable just means like operational, healthy, functional. To make a sustainable business model, we have a broader product offering than just suitcases. If we only would sell a suitcase, then that would mean that customer is going to give us a call back in 7 years, and that's a very long life cycle. But by having other products, we've got bags, we've got other travel accessories, things that can help make your life better on the go. The comfort of home on the go, as we say. It's funny because it's like it is all this Scandinavian hygge type thing where it's like we're trying to give hygge, like just make your life smoother when you're on the go. And so to make the business work, we have just a broader range of products than just suitcases, and it just is allowing you that level of ease while you're on the go.
When you come to the travel side of things, how did you guys go about building out the products for that? Because I think, travel people have certain needs and other people have preferences. And how do you fit into that? Was it you solving your problem of what you wanted?
Well, I started out with writing a 175-page business plan, and then we followed it to a no. Like I said, this girl's backpack got stolen. I was needing to do a new business venture because the bike lock thing was not panning out. Tried selling the patents of that, and that did not go at all. And so I had $600 left in the bank, a bunch of maxed out credit cards, and was like, oh dear, what am I going to do? So I made this backpack, launched it on Kickstarter. It took off. And then I just tried to keep the steam up. There was and then it's like, okay, yeah, backpacks. All right, should we do a shoulder bag? Let's try a shoulder bag. Did that the next year, did another backpack. And then it was like, okay, let's do watches and suitcases. Cause like backpacks alone is not, I don't want to be the next Herschel. Like solar powered backpacks are kind of like a bit nerdy. That's maybe not the most scalable market. But if we can start using sustainable fabrics, if we can start using ocean plastic, that's going to have a better impact than just the solar panels. So let's try that. So started, figuring out how to make the fabric work. And then it's like, oh, this can work for a wider range of backpacks. Cool. And then it's like, okay, well, suitcase. I want to do this like suitcase with this closet idea. I drew it up in 3D in my friend's VR headset thing. Dan Berger in Vancouver, he's got this VR AR association. He's the biggest proponent of VR and AR of anyone you'll ever meet. And I drew this thing in VR with this like closet and was like, hey, this could actually work. This actually could work. And then, sampled it, put it together. I think that I placed the order that day. I think it was it was June or July. I'd been to the suitcase factory already, but I was like sort of slowly tinkering on this because I was like, I think this closet idea is a bit too weird. As soon as I saw it in VR, I like emailed the factory. I was like, great, yeah, we'll proceed with this first order for 2,000 units. And I just ordered the suitcase from them, and I had the closet made somewhere else because I had a different factory because I didn't want them to know about it because I was like, this is so innovative if this works. And when we launched it, it was crickets. Nobody cared at all. We had a pop-up store in New York. It was just when I moved to New York. We had a pop-up store November 15th, 2017. Launched watches and suitcases on the same day because I was like, I know we're not going to be just a backpack company, so let's try both and see what happens. We sold like 100 watches in that first week in that pop-up store and one suitcase. And then like 6 months later, Gear Patrol wrote something about the suitcase. They're like, this suitcase with the closet thing's actually kind of cool. And then all of a sudden it went click, click, click. And all of a sudden we were sold out and we won Time Magazine Best Inventions. and like all of a sudden it gained traction, and it was just like the right creative mixed with like the right visuals, and it just like all of a sudden landed. And it, I think we have these perceptions of life of expecting things to go a certain way, and it never goes the way that you're planning on. So you might as well just run with it and see what happens. Like why waste time planning when it's not going to work out anyway? But at the same time, measure twice, cut once. Like I'm a big fan of doing it accurately, but like some of these like bigger scale things in business, it's like just take a swing and see what happens.
Yeah, I learned that kind of early, just and I'm sure you get this on the production side from doing video and stuff. No shoot ever goes to plan. Like the best you can plan it, something goes sideways, and you're like, uh-oh. It's just, and you get comfortable being like, all right, cool, we'll make the best of it. And you see that even on the biggest films that we see on the movie screen. Like it's the same thing. They tape stuff together. Gaff tape is like literally a set's best friend, and it's because everything just like breaks, goes wrong.
If you can't fix it with gaff tape, you're not using enough.
Well, and I think that's such a good lesson though, just for business. I think too many people hold off on ideas until when they're absolutely perfect. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I mean, a lot of our streaming series took longer to get out because it was like, no, it needs to be just right. But at the end of the day, people just need to see it, and that's kind of like the big piece to get out there is like, because the faster you can get that feedback. And I think that feedback loop from people of like, is this a viable idea? That's the thing that starts to drive it.
And that's what's incredible about Kickstarter. You can launch an alpha version of a product. You get people's feedback on it, and then you ship them a beta because you're able to have already gone through one iterative cycle of marketing the product and seeing what lands and what doesn't. And that's hugely valuable. And I think that like the way that a lot of people approach product design, especially in larger companies, and now as we're a bigger and bigger team, there's people that have been working at major corporations, and they're like, we should get our roadmap lined up and worked out for 5 years so we know exactly what's going on. It's like, yeah, but where's the fun in that? And at the same time, you do need to like have forecasts for factories and all that. So there's this blurred line. I think like the point that you were making about perfectionism, it's just procrastination at a certain extent. You're just holding back from releasing the thing because you're scared. And eventually, like, you gotta send it. At some point, you gotta just go for it and see what happens. And I think that is where the art in life is knowing when you're not ready enough to go for it, but you're going for it anyway. I think that the courage that's needed for those moments in life, the decisions, the outcomes from those. Well, I'm not quite ready, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. That's where I think the biggest growth moments happen in life, and sometimes the biggest like failures too.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, and that when you spoke to procrastination, I was like, oh shit, damn. Because it is. You're kind of like you're scared of what's gonna happen. But one of the things that I realized is like, what happens the day after the thing comes out? Well, you still get up, you still shower, you have breakfast, and you do your day, and you think, oh, the world's gonna see this. No, they're not. Honestly, like eventually they'll see it, but like nobody's gonna like. Honestly, at the beginning, nobody cares. Honestly, like I think a lot of the founder mindset is like, well, this is me, so therefore, like it has to be perfect. Otherwise, people are gonna judge me, and it's like nobody's gonna care. Nobody knows.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. People are like, do you think that anybody's going to notice that I've worn the same pair of jeans to work every day this week? No. Nobody cares. Like we give people far too much credit sometimes in the way that they'll think about us. People don't care about the fact that you're wearing whatever sweater. If you've got awful breath, they care about that. But like
I mean, I wear pretty much the same type of t-shirt in different colors like every single day. That's about it. Like same type of t-shirt. I have like 5 or 6 of them. Switch them out. Different color pair of jeans, couple pairs of jeans. Same thing. Nobody will care. It's like it's It's just about pursuing the thing that you want to pursue and getting it out there.
I'm a big fan of the uniform approach to life. Of like,
Definitely.
I'm wearing this thing. That's what I'm doing. That's that. Done. The amount of mental effort you can spend sometimes just to get dressed and to like look a certain way or whatever, versus like, it's to the point that like I've thought about like launching a separate brand of like uniform, like a work uniform type thing, where it's like just a few basics and it's like, great, got it, done.
Yeah. Yeah. Solve the problem, move on. Well, and I think you probably learned that a little bit from travel though. I mean, part of the idea of the suitcase and the closet is like packing for travel is no shit, kind of a pain in the ass. Like, especially if you have to have it be like you're going to a more important event, you're like, well, this thing's going to wrinkle. And they tell you not to hang those things from the, in the shower to how do you de-wrinkle it? Like that process actually is frustrating. Like, was that part of the design of the closet?
Yeah, it's funny because I just like, so one of the girls that I dated, she would be an absolute disaster in hotel rooms where she'd like open her suitcase and the bomb went off. And just like everything would just go everywhere. Cause it's like, you've got to see where your stuff is. You got to see what you have to know what to wear. And I think that there's an ADHD brain type thing about this where it's like, I have a very messy desk all the time because I just have stuff around. Cause if I out of sight, out of mind. So I need to see the things to know what's there. So the closet is this like ability to see all your outfits, see what you've got with some breathing room between them instead of having to just dig to find, because otherwise it's like hard to keep track of what's all in there. So I think that it's more about that was the driving force of just like keep it together, keep it tidy, and make it easier to find stuff. It's like all of the products. I think that I've never said this out loud before, so I'm going to try out some new words here. All of the products that we make are with like for the sake of like easing mental load. I don't want to. I know where my passport is because it's always in my bag in the secret passport pocket. I don't need to go and like rifle through my house to try to find it because it just lives right there and it's always there. And so I know where to find it. I don't want to have to think about where is my whatever, where's my like. So if you can have everything just sorted, situated, then you don't need to spend any mental effort thinking about that. You can then just think about whatever the problem is you're trying to solve in your life, career, whatever. Have a conversation with people. You know how like if you're having a great conversation with a friend and you're like grabbing lunch, the server comes and talks to you and it's like, that's a distraction from the conversation. It's like, I'm trying to have a real talk here. Don't like, I don't know, just bring us some food. I'm sure it's going to be fine. Like whatever, please. Like I'm trying to, and so there's this like, this mental freedom that comes with systemizing parts of your life. And so if you create systems, it allows more freedom for your brain to wander and meander wherever you want it to, because you're not wasting time thinking all these little boring practicalities of life. So I think that that's one thing that ties all the products together in a way that's we've never spoken about that. But I start to see that trend emerging. It's like a Bluetooth speaker. It's got a built-in power bank because that way you don't need to worry about charging your phone. There's my electronic blob. I can charge my stuff, can play music. Great, done. I don't need to like look for the extra thing, for the extra part.
I've never really talked about this, but like the way that I do a lot of my day-to-day life, somebody from the outside would be like, oh, that dude's got OCD. And who knows, maybe I do. But like, I literally will stack the clothes that I'm going to wear in the order in which I put them on, because I'm trying to ease the mental side of like, I just have to go one to the next to the next. If I, smoothie before the gym, it's pre-made as much as possible besides the milk and the mix. So that way when I wake up in the morning, all I have to do is execute. I go one thing to the next and my brain can be occupied by the thing that I'm focused on solving. And all the rest just kind of falls into place. And I think that, part of that is finding the systems that work. And so I have systems that I just kind of stick with. And it allows for that freedom to just kind of play and do whatever. It's not to be stuck in a rigid system. It's to allow for more expansion. I think a lot of people feel they either have the freedom to go like chaos or systematize everything and never have any room to play. But like through the system, you find freedom.
Just like we said earlier about creativity thrives with constraints. If you give a couple of constraints to something, then it's like, great, here's my playtime. And if you I want to get better at a more formalized like morning routine for myself, because I know that's where there's a certain I'm 37 now. I've officially flipped to like my adult self in a way. Somehow my girlfriend we moved apartments, my fiance and I, and we're now with east facing windows, and I'm waking up with the sun. I'm like tired at 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's the weirdest thing ever. My whole life, I've been complete night owl up till 1, 2 in the morning. And now all of a sudden I'm like waking up at 5:30 or 6 and like watching the sunrise. So weird. And I'm loving that. And I've never, it just switched.
And one, I think, I don't know if this is the same for you, but my creative brain would turn on at like 11 o'clock at night. It used to just like 11 p.m. It would be like, poof, now I got the idea. Now I got to run with this till 4 in the morning because I'm on it. Yeah. But I'm also finding myself like, oh man, it's 9 o'clock. It's getting kind of late. It's time to go to bed. and it's just this, and I agree the morning routine is great. I think one of the things is to limit distractions. Like a couple months ago, I literally removed the calendar app off my phone, mail app off my phone. I literally got rid of all the things that distract from the day-to-day, because then when you sit down to do anything, you're just fully engaged on that one thing. And I think that too often we're distracted by so many things. And that's why I love the way you guys design your products. It's the idea of like remove distraction, simplify.
You're familiar with the urgent versus important matrix, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. But for those that don't know, head into it.
It's a 4-square quadrant where there's in one corner there's urgent and important. Then there's another corner where it's urgent, not important. Then there's not urgent, not important, and urgent but not important. Whatever. So anyway, it's like if you can just focus. What I'm trying to do is focus my life and my time on the things that are important but not urgent. Urgency creates this like panic level that I don't like where my brain goes there. I make bad decisions. I'm not able to show up as my full self. Those urgent and important things take time to like think through. You need to be like in the right state of mind and like create space to do them. But those are the only things that matter. If you're spending your time on the urgent things that pop up and just putting out fires day to day, like let them burn, baby. Let those fires burn. There's a trash can on fire. Yeah, the Titanic's sinking. Don't worry about it. The fire's not going to be the problem. Focus on the life rafts. Go. Like,
Yep. No, it's so true. When especially, I think we focus so much on that urgent. I mean, I was guilty of that, especially like when you're founding a company and you're going through that startup phase, everything's kind of a fire, and you're like, we could die the next day. So you're like going all around. And then when you have that moment where it's kind of stabilizes just a little bit, you're like, okay, what's important for us to make progress? Because then you realize that those fires can burn and it'll be okay. And like that same mentor, that I talked about earlier, he would go, dude, don't respond to that email within 5 minutes. He goes, watch what happens if you just let it be for 7 hours. Most of the time it solves itself. And I was, and literally like that day, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And email comes in. I'm like anxious. I'm like, oh God, I should respond. Like that urgency mindset. And I was like, no, let it go. And this was like very early in my career. And then like seven hours later, I get an email that goes, oh, problem solved. And I was like, oh my God, he was right. And it was just one of those lessons of like, just focus on what gets you going forward. And that will be the big leaps forward.
There's also like a different, this is, spoken from a place of privilege to be able to ignore some of those urgent things. I know there's a lot of roles, a lot of jobs, a lot of lifestyles that have more urgency, and that stuff needs to be dealt with in that way. But like, that's just not the life that I want to live. That's like one of the reasons I don't want kids. Like there's so many urgent things that pop up with like babies and like screaming and diapers and things. And it's like, I love kids. I love being an uncle. So much fun. I've got 5 nieces. They're great. And it's like, I can have a lot of fun and bring a lot of value to a kid's life, but I don't want to bring value in the way of like changing diapers and making 3 meals a day. Like I don't, that's just like too much, like too much for me.
But there are places, I think there is definite privilege in to be able to kind of be like, I choose to live life this way. But also, I think I was reading this morning from somebody who was talking about, they're very successful now, and they're like, but what you didn't see was the 14-hour work days when I started, the stress and anxiety on all my relationships, the amount of hospital trips because of panic. Like, I think you go through stages in life, and everybody kind of does. And it's recognizing that those stages come with certain challenges, but that's also what helps the development. Like I don't know, but when you and I first talked, it was like you can kind of tell when like people have kind of gone through some of the shit before, and you're like, okay, cool. Whereas like other people who haven't gone through it yet, you're like, you'll probably go through it, but you're not there yet, and that's okay because everybody does. And whenever I've met, a lot of like, I mean, some of the most successful CEOs, I'm like, oh my god, no way, you must be like this. No, they've done the same thing. They've gone through a bunch of shit. It's just that same cycle, and it's how you deal with that I think is the differentiator.
I think that if you can be rooted in a sense of your future self, your present self, and your past self, and if you can use that to sort of steady yourself a little bit, where it's like, I know where I'm going, and I know that that's going to be better than where I am. And where I am right now is shit. It's hard. But where I was a while ago was maybe also shit. I'm working my way through it. I am on it. I'm getting there. It's okay. And I think that like I don't know how, like it's hard to comment to like how to get through those struggle bus moments in life, because you just got to eat shit and just get through it. And like you just got to not give up, because if you give up, you're not going to get to the other side. Swimming across a long pool, you're halfway in the middle. Like, do you want to swim halfway back, or do you want to swim halfway forward? Like,
and I think part of it's that uncertainty, knowing that where the other end is. It's like, well, what if it keeps going? Well, then you're still getting there. It's just part of that process. I think that one of the big lessons for me was knowing that, when you go through that process, like it's a reminder of, I don't want to say like, it might sound morbid, but like the idea of like, look, you could honestly just get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like anybody can just die the next day. Like, are you going to take this day as a way of like, was I stoked on how I lived this day? And then you just take that every single day. And I think that goes back to like that idea of urgency and important. If you were not going to be surviving the next day, you're probably going to do what is most important. And that becomes the only thing that you're looking to accomplish. And it's not to live with the mindset of like fear that you might die every single day, but just as a reminder of like, damn, okay, am I moving in the right direction that I'd be proud of the next day?
I think that exposure to death in like your younger life, whether that's however that might present itself, is a very powerful force that I think sometimes people might be sad about having had negative experiences or family members or friends passing away. Not to minimize it, it fucking sucks. But I think that dealing with death and accepting, like have you ever had like a near death experience yourself? Like,
I have not, I wouldn't quite say near death, but definitely at some moments where you get reminders, but I've had people close to me. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I when I was 16, I ruptured my spleen BMXing and was in the hospital in ICU, and there was my, forget what it was, hemoglobin count, my platelet count, my red blood cell count. I forget what it was. When I got there, this thing was at 140, whatever it was, and that was like low. It's supposed to be like 180 or 200, and they kept taking my blood every 15 minutes because that it was like, they're like, we think you're bleeding internally, but there's no way to really know for sure. I'm like, oh, fuck. And I had passed out like on my friend's doorstep. Like it was an issue. Handlebar stabbed me in the stomach. And that, like, after a few more blood draws, my this number, whatever it was like 105, 102, 99. It was like, okay, as soon as this hits 95, as soon as this dips below 95, we're putting it in and we're going to cut out your spleen. But you're 16 years old, so we want to keep it in if we can. It's good for filtering your blood and like your long-term health and stuff. So like, okay, all right. And then it like dipped. It was like 96, 95, and they were like, all right, you might want to make peace with your parents today, like in case you have anything that's unsaid. Like, there's a chance you could die tonight in the surgery. I was like, what the fuck? I hopped up on morphine at this point, so it didn't hit quite as hard as it maybe would have, but it was like, oh, this is that conversation. Whoa. And I think that having had that, like, having a doctor say it to you is very different from like, it's a crazy kind of like authoritative feeling of like, oh shit, I might die. Like, people treat life in this way where it's like we take it so seriously. They're like, you're not gonna make it out of this thing alive. They're like, have
Nobody
fun while
does.
you're at it. Try the thing. Like, nobody, not one person. So I think that there's something to that. I feel like I took that a little bit further off the tracks than it needed to. But
No. Because I think that's very much like one of those things that, I mean, it drives you kind of in how you live life. I mean, the closest reminder I have to that kind of thought process was the guy who taught me how to use a camera, my grandfather. He did film and media back in like 50s. They would like fly airplanes next to each other. He was doing high-speed camera stuff, like all film stuff, cool shit. And I was like, this dude does everything. And, he was retired when I was born, but I was like, you did some amazing stuff. And, I found out he spent 4 years in a hospital with TB and was missing a third of his lung. And when he was like in his 20s, and he was like, I'm going to go for the rest of my life and send it as hard as possible. And he did everything. Sailed to Hawaii twice. He did all this filming stuff. It's just like there was no sense of like, well, why not just go for it? And so like that was always really embedded in me to just like, no, just go for it, because, well, he had a third of his lung missing almost his whole life, and he still did all that. So, dude, what are you doing? And that was kind of like that thought process always reminds me. And it's like, just go for it every day.
Can we talk about how sailing is like the ultimate and sustainable luxury? Did you sail with your grandfather at all?
Yes. So I still sail to this point. I mean, more like a small boat, but I absolutely, yeah. Sailing's incredible. There's something about it that it's magical. I don't know if I have the stomach for quite the journey, but like my grandfather in 1959, 69, he did LA to Hawaii. And then my dad, 2 summers ago, did San Francisco to Hawaii. So it's kind of like a family pilgrimage thing to kind of do. And each time that both of them did it, and my grandpa made a film in 1959, like black and white film, like no sound, like classic. But like every time they came back from the trip, they were just different. Like my dad mentioned I was different. His dad was a little bit different. And then my dad was different. Yeah, sailing's awesome. So you sail a little bit.
Yeah. My grandfather had a little, like a 24-foot sailboat in Norway. And so that was also like spending time sailing and just, yeah. I've gone on some sailing trips the last couple of years with friends where we just like chartered a boat for a week and, bare boat. So we're just doing the thing. And it's such an incredible like bonding experience to be trapped on a boat where, and it's funny how it's inevitably the worst moments, like the most harrowing moments. And when you look back on it, it's like, hey, remember that time that like unexpected squall came up and we like our anchor got lost? Like, it's the crazy stuff that you remember, and that's where like you bond with friends in a way where it's like, yeah, I think it's really cool. And I think that sailing it's this beautiful, magical, like you're on the water, you're going somewhere, so you've got a purpose, like you're doing something, and you can actually just chill while you're doing it because it's like the boat's not going very fast. It's just whatever the wind is. Like you're doing 6-7 knots, great. That's about as much as you're gonna get, and you just accept that, and you can just chill. I have a hard time slowing down in life, so I love a thing like that where it's like this this is the options are here. This is, again, it's constraints. It's a lovely constraint to relax.
Yeah, and you have a most likely larger than the 24-foot, but you got a constraint of a boat. And that's kind of your existence for that period of time, which is kind of cool. Yeah, for me, I mean, sailing has always been what I enjoy doing. But I've been huge into swimming. I was a long distance triathlete for a long time, and I liked the swimming side the most. And because I'm very much, I don't slow down very often. Like even from when I was a little kid, it was like, Steve, just slow down, stop. And I was like, no, keep going, too much energy. And what I found, like, I now have gone back to long distance swimming, and like there's just this pure joy because it's almost like a meditative state. Because one, you can't reach me on my phone when I'm swimming. Sorry. Darn. And all you have to think about is one stroke after another, gliding through the water. And like that, just like presence of just simplicity. Oh, it's huge. And it brings that perspective back to when it's time to, get into the craziness. You have a different perspective when you go at it. It's awesome.
If you need a goggle recommendation for swimming, try the Magic 5. Friend of mine's company, they make like custom 3D printed, like you scan your face and then it's like perfectly shaped to your eye socket. So there's like no water leakage. It's incredible.
I'm going to definitely check it out because, the goggle leak is a thing for sure. And foggy goggles are the worst. Like between those two things, you're like, oh, come on. Yeah, no, I would definitely check them out. Magic 5. Yeah. And I just think like for me, the ocean is one of those things where I think when it comes to especially like the sustainability industry, but just call the planet Earth, like to me, that's like one of the things that motivates me to do stuff like this. It's to bring some awareness around like, guys, we got to protect this like beautiful thing we have, because it's truly special.
It's one crossover that I've noticed for most people that are doing anything sustainable, especially if there's an ocean focus. They grew up playing in the sea. Some way, whether it's scuba diving, whether it's turning over rocks, or whether it's like your dad had a yacht, whatever. Like people that got to play in the sea and like participate with nature in that way have this like, yeah, we need to protect it. And I think that, living in cities, living in inland communities, you get isolated from that in some sort of way. But I think that if you just like give kids time on the beach as children, they will learn to care about the ocean. Like, just a fact.
I couldn't agree more. I totally recognize how fortunate I am to have this. But I mean, I grew up in Santa Cruz, which is, considered one of the most beautiful places on the California coast, and just north of Big Sur, which, I mean, come on, Big Sur. And when you grow up around the sea like that, you just have this, I mean, the sound, the smells, the uncertainty of it, like just everything. You're like, wow, this is special and it's cool. And I moved away from it for a little while. I was living in the mountains in Colorado, and it was like after probably like 6 or 7 years, I was like, damn, I need to get back close to the sea. Like there was something about being close to the sea that made me feel a little bit more fulfilled. And I was like, oh, there's a tie there that's important.
I could never live in Colorado for that reason. Like I can't live, like if there's no ocean, I like freak out. And if I fly to a new country and I'm like near the water or something, I need to like go to wherever the water is and be like, okay, it's there. I know where it is. And then I can return to life. But it's like I can't until I know where it is. It's like some people like check for the exits. I guess that's what it is. It's like my like Viking bloodline. It's like, where's the exit?
Oh, that's great.
I think the ocean's always this like, connector to like with growing up, like spending more of my life in Canada, but then family in Norway. But like looking at the ocean and knowing like, I could take that and go home, like go see my family. Like I could do that. And like being in the south of Norway where my family is, I remember like standing with my grandfather and like looking out, and I was like, I think I can see Denmark. And we we're like staring across the sea. You can't. It is physically impossible. The curvature of the earth, it is not possible. And he knows that it's not possible. But I was like 10 or something, and he was like, oh yeah, I think you're right. Wow, you've got really good eyes. Will you let me have that one?
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. I think that when it comes to ocean, I love what you guys are doing on the product side, because I think, ocean plastic is, obviously a huge topic. But also when it comes to product creation, I think a lot of people are now a little bit more mindful around like how things are made, not necessarily just that, oh, it was made, it showed up here, magic, I have it. Like there's like this now, how is something made? How did you guys kind of navigate that? Because I think the ocean plastic industry is, I mean, definitely an industry for materials now, but there's also, dealing with the sourcing of it and making sure it's actually authentic and stuff like that. That's one side, but also you guys are making products, and most of the time people in sustainability will point at people who make products and they're like, hey, you're just adding more products to the system. But like there's good ways to make products. So like, what was that looking like when you guys decided to make things out of different materials?
So the company started. The first product was a solar powered backpack that was launched on Kickstarter, and I was on a sourcing trip. I was visiting factories in Asia, and then I popped down to Bali for a week to just hang out. I was surfing, and there was all this plastic in the waves and on the beach, and it was just like, man, this is devastating. And I thought to myself, like, okay, this little solar panel that we're making is not going to change the world from a like energy standpoint. It's just not going to be that. Like, not everybody wants a solar powered backpack. Like, it's could look a bit nerdy or something. Maybe it's not going to be mass market. Like, could we use this material to start making the product? Because then we could make a broader range of products, have a stronger sustainability tie-in, and we could sort of use that as the core mission of the business as it scales. And so at that point in 2016, 17, there was no market for ocean bound plastic or finding it in an effective way. So it was really hard. We had to like buy a container of plastic that had been collected to use for the first batch of fabric. And that was really hard to like come across and to reach those minimums. So we launched another Kickstarter campaign in late 2018 to do the first batch of fabric. And we used it making a product, just a regular backpack. Um, and then about a year and a bit later, we started transitioning that fabric to being in all of our products, and then we named it Shoretex later. Um, and then I was on a sourcing trip in the Philippines visiting one of our plastic collection partners, and I realized that like we're filming a video with like what they're doing, using that for some impact stuff. And I realized that like the plastic waste collectors are cherry picking for the PET because that's the highest valued thing, and they're leaving behind the other stuff because they're getting paid to collect PET. They're not getting paid to collect the low value stuff. And it's like fair enough that like they're just doing their job and they're earning a living wage, not more. So like they're getting paid, some cents per bottle they find kind of thing. So I realized we should shift the business model to not only use the material, but then to collect the rest of the bad stuff too, the rest of the low value plastic. So we started out with 5 pounds. Now we do 6, where we use 100% recycled content in our products, and then we collect 6 pounds of plastic per item sold. That's a lot of it's done in partnership with Sungai Watch, which is a group based in Indonesia. And these are river barriers that are set up on rivers, preventing plastic from entering the ocean. Because once plastic hits the open ocean, it sinks within a few months. Usually 3 months, 90% plastic sinks. So like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is actually by weight not that much actual plastic, and it's a huge expensive endeavor for not a lot of actual environmental impact, or especially like coastal communities. And so we're focusing all of our efforts on coastal communities where there's heavily populated areas where that plastic is having a detrimental effect to downstream, like the livelihood of fishing industries, the way that plastic coverage affects mangroves regrowth. About a year and a half ago, we did a big cleanup of like 40 tons of plastic from a mangrove that was, I think it was 22 hectares, so that's like 40 acres or something. Don't quote me on that. A very large mangrove in Bali, and we cleaned up like a meter deep, like 3 feet deep of plastic. And like 6 months later, the mangrove started growing back. All these new seedlings started sprouting. All the birds started coming back. Some snakes too. And it was like, wait, there's definitely a like environmental benefit going on here. Like, is there a way we could like measure this and like sell it as a carbon credit to like fund additional things or something? So that was kind of the question that I started with. and then we brought in a group of scientists called Adventure Scientists. They're based in Bozeman, Montana. Greg Trainer is an awesome dude. The whole company's rad. And they, Dr. Lauren Oakes, who's a prof at Stanford on forest ecology, she sort of led the charge of us creating and designing a study for how can we measure the impact of plastic on mangroves, and then what is that outcome, so we can help quantify the science behind it, and then fund more cleanups. We decided to go the route, well, based on her recommendation, and carbon credit world is having its own complications. We decided to go the route of philanthropy and biodiversity, and because biodiversity credits are like not quite a thing, but like it's much cleaner money than the carbon credit funding, because it's like carbon credit funding is like an extractive model, whereas if you're just doing philanthropy and it's like people are putting in money and this is going to help make the environment here better, great, that's all they're hoping for. There's no like, we don't need to worry too much about exactly how much or meet some minimum, because we're not selling that. We're just trying to help clean up the planet and measure it at the same time so we can help get more data. And so that science side, my fiance is a science writer and genius, and she sort of is leading the science side of what those impacts are on the cleanup side, and then I'm sort of focusing on the plastic side. So we launched a foundation together last year, called the Solgaard Nix Foundation. Her name's Lindsay Nix Walker, and we're focusing on that. So we're trying to raise some money trying to raise $1 million to do the 3-year study of the impact on mangroves, and to like create that whole thing. So this is where, again, just like you asked about like what was the thing that fed into the product, in the same way this like impact side of work has, it started out with a solar panel, then it became plastic cleanups for PET fabric, and then it became this, then it became that. And I think, and now it's like morphing into this like whole upstream waste management collection, river collections, and then mangrove cleanups, and then monitoring of the whole thing and putting it all together. It's like, I think we need to think about our life experiences more as Lego bricks than we think of them as bylines. And I think we use them as building blocks to build up and stack it on.
Oh, that's huge. I mean, one, I think a lot of people don't realize how much plastic there is, like especially in the States. Like, you throw it in the recycle bin, 90% doesn't even get recycled anyway, but you throw it in there and then you're like, I'm doing good. And then you realize that we just shipped it overseas, and then the overseas side, most likely China, was like, you know what, we don't want that anymore. So then it gets just dumped in Southeast Asia. And I think that's where a lot of people don't realize the impact of everything, and actually how much it's impacting the ecosystem. Like there are literal endless amounts of plastic down there.
I want to call out your China comment, because I know where it's coming from, and you're completely wrong.
Really? Oh my gosh, correct me. I'm all about learning. I need to learn something today.
China was accepting recyclables from the States as a thing where American companies would ship their recyclable plastics over.
Yes.
American companies did not respect these rules whatsoever, and they were shipping garbage, and they were using these containers that were going back as landfills, and they were just shipping all sorts of junk. China wasn't doing such a bad job of mishandling it from a population basis perspective compared to a lot of other countries, but it was a lot of this was caused by American waste management companies illegally shipping garbage back to China instead of shipping them recyclables. And so China now has a ban on accepting recyclables from any other country because people are shipping them garbage, not recyclables. And China's streets are cleaner than most cities in America. China's doing a pretty good job. It's very easy in the States to shit on China. And
absolutely,
I think that there's an entirely different narrative of, hey, actually, China is a bit crazy with the way they handle some laws. There's some draconian measures, and there's definitely some unethical treatment of the people in Tibet, and like these things. There's definitely issues, but if you take does 80% of the population get treated like quite well with healthcare and that stuff, yeah, like a
Hmm.
big part of the
Hmm.
country does very well, and the government makes decisions for like a large scale, a large swath of the population, and just makes decisions and does things and acts instead of just being bureaucratic and never getting anything done. And I think it's actually quite incredible uh, how, yeah,
Well, I mean, even on the energy side, like that's one of the things that I think we've been trying to focus on is like,
they built more solar and wind plants this year than America has ever done. Period.
and they're doing small modular nuclear reactors that are actually pretty clean energy. They're building tons of them. Like they're, yeah, and they're investing in the infrastructure. And to be honest, like, God, the amount of influx of industry they took from like when every country ever just went, hey, China, why don't you start manufacturing everything? That amount of scale to like try and manage that, it's a fast learning process. They actually were able to overcome all the challenges that come with it, from emissions to everything. And by no means is it still perfect, but like,
They've done an incredible job. Like, yes, there's some mistakes made, but like, damn, China runs pretty freaking smooth and outputs so much stuff to so much of the world.
absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, the energy side, I mean, yeah, they're so progressive on that side.
I mean, the electric cars in China, the amount of electric car companies coming out of China, and like the electrification of their grid, they because they didn't have the same level of infrastructure that the US did in like the 50s, etc. They're able to leapfrog and just do those infrastructure things like right with more knowledge, more info now. And like the quietest city I've ever been in was Guangzhou on a Sunday. And it was the quietest city experience I've ever experienced. I heard birds chirping, saw an electric bus, electric cars, people, kids giggling in the streets, just like, it was just quiet and calm. It was loud as hell on Friday, but there's tons
Yeah.
of trucks and stuff. But there's no truck traffic. So, but still, like, I think that there's an alternative script where a lot of the Chinese cities can be thought of in the future as like more utopia than a lot of American cities, and I think that that's a pretty wild thought. Like, it's pretty. Um, I think it's an interesting thought, and I think anyone that's been there would agree. Uh, and I think a lot of people that haven't would be like, "No, you're wrong."
I love that you mentioned the leapfrog thought, because there is that discussion around like, you know, America did this route of how to provide energy. And at the time it was like a scalable thing. And that most other countries decided to skip that moment, and they went through a little bit of like a uh-oh energy, but now they're able to build a grid that's completely different, better, and more sustainable in terms of energy usage, power usage, delivery, energy loss. Like here we lose a lot of our energy just in our transmission, and then there's how we actually produce our energy. And that's, I mean, 20% in the US still comes from nuclear, but like only 20. And realistically, it's super clean energy that lasts 60 years. So what's kind of next for Solgaard? What are you guys kind of working on? What's kind of the goals for you guys? I know we talked a little bit about, you know, not having a 5-10 year goal, but what are some of the goals?
I'm taking a bit of a pause right now, where I'm stepping back from day to day stuff and trying to spend like a month or two right now on forming that 5 to 10 year goal, just to, because now it's like we're 8 years in, and it's like we've gotten to a place that's really incredible. We're such an amazing team. We're like 37 people, um, and then we employ 45 people full time in Indonesia who are doing plastic cleanup. So it's like, while we're not a 100-person company, we're kind of sort of in a bit of a way close. It's kind of, and I find that really fun. And it's yeah. So I think what's next? There's a few products that I want to explore that are in this space of. There's a few products in the travel space that I want to do that are like obvious ones for, what you see of our current product mix. But there's a couple of other ones that might be a bit more surprising to folks, that are for like helping focus, helping create that like distraction free zone for yourself. And so that's where, there's some things that are like loosely travel ish related and some that are completely not. then I'm also thinking about like, should I make this like work uniform thing where it's like make a few basic things and just be like, here, I'm wondering if I'll make that for myself and then just like have it available on a website, because like I'd probably need to order 500 of whatever shirts. So it's like, well, I'm gonna order 500 of them and I only need 10, so might as well sell the rest. So I might do something like that. I'm kind of I'm weighing a few options now and trying to think like, okay, I think I've been very much on the grind for 14 years. I've been an entrepreneur for 14 years, and it's been it's had a lot of downs, for a lot of struggle for a lot of that time. And in the last couple of years, it started to get into clearer air, and that's felt incredible. And now it's like, okay, I think I can start to play again and like play with a few fun ideas. So yeah, TBD, but some things are in the works.
Nice. What got you kind of through some of those low times? Because I think those are the things that I think define a lot of the upswing, is how you get through the downs.
Taking the downs in stride, and trying to harness whatever downward gravity you have and use that to help boost you back up and out the other side. Um, Embracing the suck in that way is one thing. There's a book by Seth Godin called The Dip. It's a short book. I think it's like an hour-long audiobook. But he goes through a bunch of examples of like how many companies that we know of today, right before their aha pop out into sunshine moment, was like extreme duress and extreme problems. The company Slack was a was a gaming company, and they launched 300 games, none of them worked, or whatever the number is. And then they were like, well, this internal tool that we use for communicating, maybe we could build this into a product. And then, bada bing, bada boom, billions of dollars. And I think that in the same way, there's like, I realized that where the book The Dip talks a lot about, I can't actually remember the content of it super well, so I don't want to misquote it. But I think what's brought me through those times is like, even though it sucks and it's hard right now, I'm not going to take the easy way out. I'm going to just grind through this, do the right thing, and I know that that'll pay off in the long run, because I just need to do that. I think that I've placed pretty big bets in life, and the double-edged sword of that I think has been actually a benefit is when you're in so much debt that you can't get a job at Starbucks because you couldn't live and ever pay your debt off. Like, it's like I was so screwed that it was like, well, the only way to make this work is to make it work. There's no other way out of it. And so it's like, I've got a tattoo that says no plan B. And like there's just another way to make plan A work. You just need to figure it out. Just figure it out. And I think that is perhaps not the most helpful advice, but I think it's the most real advice I can give. Embrace the suck and just power through it. Surround yourself with great people, surround yourself with smart people who've been there before, and make sure you have a safe space where you can talk, you can complain, you can get some thoughts out. And then there's a time for that, and then there's a time to just buckle in and get through it.
Adrian, thank you for just being a part of the podcast, being so open about sharing just your journey as an entrepreneur, but also just keep doing what you guys are doing at Solgaard. Like, I think that when you have products that are not just beautiful, but actually doing good in the world, that's what's actually going to make a huge difference. And I think that even as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're like, well, I want the effect to be felt now, but I think that your effect will be felt now, but also, for the years to come, that, people are going to be using them and being like, hey, this is awesome.
I think patience is a virtue. Catch it if you can. Rarely found in women, never found in men. Yeah. One of my mom's favorite quotes. I think that if we could all give ourselves a dose of more patience and understanding, because like if you do the right things, it'll come. It'll come. At some point, it'll come. It's gonna take a while, but just get there. It's been a pleasure, man. Thanks so much, Steve. It's been great chatting.
Thank you so much for listening to the GOAT podcast. You are the reason why we exist and why we show up every single day.
You know, I've spent too many years being against stuff, and I've found now that it's a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to be for something.
How are we going to power the world? How are we going to build the world? How are we going to feed the world?
Company isn't just good or bad, black or white. Usually there's a lot more there, a lot more that they don't know.
It's actually about what you do in your daily life every day can make a huge difference.
Give this episode a share, join our GOAT community, but most importantly, go spend some time in nature, because you might find it a meaningful reminder of the amazing place that we get to call home. I'm Steve Cassingham, and we'll see you next time.